Good afternoon. My name is Brian Reif, and welcome to today's Activity Strong webinar, The Science of Caring Evidence-Based Innovations for Non-Pharmaceutical Dementia Care. For today's webinar, we are providing one free NAB, NCCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRTD CEU credits. To be eligible for the CEU credits, you need to remain on the webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will be providing the requested post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box, and it will also be sent via email this afternoon. Please make sure that you check your junk and spam folder for this link. The survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Standard Time this Thursday. If you have any questions, please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of day on Friday. Again, please make sure that you check your junk and spam folder on Friday for the CEU certificate. Now I'd like to turn it over to Charles.
Thank you so much, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's Activity Strong webinar. If you're new to us, welcome, double welcome. Activity Strong was started by Link Senior more than almost 5 years ago in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And as Link Senior merged with LifeLoop last year, we're very excited to bring this platform to continue to bring this platform to senior living, and again to enhance by just simply acknowledging the amazing work of activity and life enrichment professionals by empowering them and providing them some of the best education. So I'm so excited to, in a few minutes, introduce my dear friend Valerie Larochelle. And as you can probably realize, I said it with a French accent because I'm French and Valerie also is French. So we thought about doing this webinar in French, but we won't, because I think we won't pass the CU credits. But know that this topic is really dear and near to our heart, and it is all about memory care and bringing some of the best experience to our residents in senior living. Just a little word of introduction so that you fully understand the different organizations. LifeLoop so all of the Activity Strong resources that you could find before are all kept now on the lifeloop.com. So if you're ever looking for past webinar or some of our upcoming sessions, please feel free to either visit lifeloop.com or take your cell phone and scan the QR code. If you haven't heard of LifeLoop before, again, this organization, myself and my team merged late last year, and essentially really in the line of what Link Senior was about, is one of the most innovative, actually the most innovative platform in this category. I'm very excited to say that we also won the McKnight 2024 Innovator of the Year Award. And as you can see by some of these awesome metrics here on this slide, we have now more than 26 years of senior living experience. We touch the lives of more than 550,000 residents through 4,700 communities. And we're very proud to be partnering with more than 60 of the top 100 providers in the industry. At its core, and very much with some of the values that Link Senior provided, LifeLoop is very much about enhancing the resident experience, but all of that can only work by improving what teams do every day, and also including the family members, which are essential. Really focusing on 4 pillars of value: engagement, connection, the analysis, and an efficiency is really empowering the team members. So I've known Valerie for years now. And I think, the best way to kind of introduce Valerie's session today is that we all know in activity and programming that as any human beings, resident, especially the ones that are on a cognitive path, have these quote unquote needs, right? Needs. And sometimes needs go unmet for different reasons. And I think that ultimately in activities and life enrichment, we know often that these needs are expression either of pain and boredom, nothing else. So it is a duty for us as an industry to really be able to bring solutions that are non-pharmacological for this experience. And so this is why I'm so excited to now formally introduce Valerie Larochelle, who's the CEO and co-founder of Eugeria, for this presentation. Valerie, take it away. And sorry, one last thing I forgot to say is everyone in the chat, make sure that you select the everyone drop-down so that everyone can see your contribution, because we'll have questions throughout the presentation. Valerie, yours.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. Thank you, Charles, for the introduction. And yes, agreed. Like this presentation, we want it to be also participative. So it will be great if you can write in the chat certain answer to certain questions we're going to have. So let me share my screen just right there so we can start. And perfect. So we named the webinar today The Science of Caring, but it's really about evidence-based innovation for non-pharmaceutical dementia care. So I'll start with a little introduction if you have not heard of Eugeria or myself. I'll start with the kind of rational approach to why we started Eugeria. So Eugeria was founded in 2018 by myself and Dr. Kwak Nguyen, who's right there on the right on the picture. So Dr. Nguyen is a geriatrician doctor, and he's our medical expert. And when we started Eugeria, we were looking at where is there a gap in innovation for dementia care, and how can we leverage a backed by science approach to answer some of those needs associated with dementia. So that's a more like rational approach, but on a more personal aspect to my story, I'm very fortunate and privileged that all my grandparents live past 80. And I say it because it is a privilege to have your loved one age, and all my grandparents past 80 years old. But then all four of them had a form of dementia at the end of their life, or some of them are still alive today. And what I put here is I have a grandma that's living with vascular dementia. It's been very stable. And what it has taught me is that it can be a very long disease. So in her case, when I started Eugeria in 2018, she was just diagnosed with vascular dementia, and it's been very stable. And as of today, she's still with us, living in a memory care neighborhood. My grandpa, who I put here on the bottom left, passed away, unfortunately, last year. And what his journey throughout vascular dementia, also in his case, taught me is that there is a real difference between living with dementia and suffering from dementia. And for him, he was living with dementia for 5 years, having good quality of life, living at home with my grandma, having his family around. There were some needs, there was some frustration, there was a day of higher confusion, but overall he was living with dementia and in a context of love and care. And then the last 2 months, he was suffering from dementia. He had had a fall, he had to do rehab, and the dementia prevented him from regaining quality of life. And I think in his case, I saw really the difference between living with dementia and suffering from dementia. And I strongly believe that we can do better, and that throughout innovation, there's things that we can create that really increase quality of life. So what is Eugeria? So our mission is simple, is to innovate, to improve quality of life. And it comes from a Greek word where eu means well. So if you think about euphoria, for example, that's where it comes from. And geria means aging. And aging well is the core of our mission. And that's what we picked that name, Eugeria. What we do at Eugeria is we review scientific research. So that's core to who we are. We have a team. The doctor is our medical expert. We have people that have PhD. We have access to occupational therapists, physiotherapists. So we review the scientific research around different type of innovation. We consult with healthcare professionals. So we do have clients that also are always open to test new innovation. And then we conduct those product trials with local senior to make sure that we pick only in our portfolio products that are high quality. Effective means that they answer an unmet need, dignifying, and backed by science. So whenever we have a product in our portfolio that we distribute, those are the 4 criteria. Today, we're going to focus really around backed by science, and this is where I'm going to spend most of my time today. Very high level, but we do have things from the earlier stages of dementia all the way to the late stages. So earlier when people struggle to situate themselves in time, which is the first thing that can go in the disease, we have adapted clock that people can control remotely to help someone take the medication, go to their appointment. And then we have product like the True Door that customize your door, that helps with wandering. Tovertafel Cradle and Hug, we'll talk quickly about it later on. But this is examples of product that we do carry. So before we start today's official session, Eugeria wanted to share with you a little bit of observation also of what we're seeing in the dementia care market, which is really our expertise and our focus. So some of this here has to do more with the earlier stages, so people that are living in independent living or still at home. But those are the three kind of big observations that we're seeing. So first, we're seeing that the at-home care market is still underserved. So the earlier stages of the disease, there's a lack of great products. There's a lot of noise, a lot of the health tech. Our team just went to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. A lot of noise in the sense there's a lot of technology that are emerging. And what we found, especially with that technology, is sometimes people will be very excited about sensors, AI. You know, they say, oh, it's great, there's intelligence, artificial intelligence, there's a sensor, and by the way, it's for older adults. Oh, and by the way, it's for dementia at home. And usually those products don't tend to work as well. They may have great technology, but they're lacking the design. And what we find is product that designed for dementia, and then say, by the way, there's a sensor. But the sensor is like secondary. What's really core is how they have designed to a use case of someone living with dementia tends to be better product and way more efficient. So there's still a lot of noise in that kind of age tech, and some products are still quite expensive for the home care market. So again, I'm talking independent living and people at home. We find and observe that there's great research progression on understanding the disease and how we can compensate, so how we can help someone at the different stages, and that's what we will focus on today. And then the last part is there's a very fragmented ecosystem that's not really ready for what's coming. So often at Eugeria, we do say there is a lot of people today living with a cognitive impairment or a form of dementia, but the first baby boomers will turn 85 years old in 2030, and the last baby boomer will turn 85 years old in 2050. So the real accelerated growth and needs that we will have in that kind of dementia care segment will be between 2030 and 2050. So 2030 is almost tomorrow, like it's in 4 years, 5 years. And the ecosystem is very fragmented still, and there's a need that Eugeria want to play in to bring players together, bring research together, understanding what works, and scaling some of those innovations so that we can reduce the price and be more ready for what's coming as a society. So let's jump into today's webinar, who's called The Science of Caring. There's two key principles around why this session matters so much today. First is that there is dementia-associated behaviors that does pose a challenge for your resident and for your caretaker and for the families. And we'll talk about a few of those behaviors. I'm using the word behaviors, but I really like what Charles said of expression of unmet needs. And then the second is why non-pharmaceutical care matters and works. And that's the core of what we'll talk about today. We brought this slide here. It's no need to like take big notes. We can send also the studies after this webinar. But basically what we wanted to show here is when we look at aberrant motor behaviors, agitation, anxiety, depression, delusion, apathy, no matter what the form of dementia is, if it's Alzheimer's disease, if it's vascular dementia, if it's a mixed dementia, it's still very similar in terms of importance in which expression of unmet needs or behaviors is more often. The only one that varies is irritability, which is to be less for people with vascular dementia. But in all of the other behaviors, it's very similar no matter which form of dementia your resident may be living with. So why non-pharmaceutical care does matters is that there is limitation to traditional pharmaceutical approach, which it addresses symptoms and not necessarily the root cause. It has limited personification and negative side effects. And the negative side effects, like we are all in this field where we have seen studies and example of someone that is on a medication, it creates a side effect. There's another medication who creates another side effect. And there is some vicious circle into some of those medication and the side effect it provides. While non-pharmaceutical care, especially in the case of behaviors and expression of unmet needs, it has benefits like enhancing quality of life, a personalized approach, or person-centered care, but also, and that's what I want to focus on, is the effect that lasts throughout the day. And that's the data I will give you today, because even if today there's some things that I say, oh, I knew this part, I hope you come out also with like, now I have the tools to tell someone why it matters so much, why the things that I have observed in my resident, in the impact it has when we use different approach that are non-pharmaceutical. Now I have the data to back it up. So on this slide here is we took, so when Eugeria does research and we evaluate research to know if we're going to add a product, we go a little bit more into those randomized trial research, and we go in those kind of individual research. For the context of today's webinar, we went more into those meta-analysis kind of systemic review kind of research. And the first one we're going to talk about today here is this one that has 163 studies into this systematic review that non-pharmaceutical interventions such as care, massage, touch, music, we'll talk about outdoor also, were more efficient than pharmaceutical intervention, especially for aggression and agitation. And here I wanted to pause and say thank you also, because this is what the majority of you do day in, day out, in being there with the resident, in providing those different non-pharmaceutical approach, and to know that it has more efficacy than pharmaceutical intervention for aggression and agitation. It's like it's even more powerful. We all know that our work matters, but to see the data like this makes it matter even more, if I can say, or at least you can tell people. So today we're going to focus on four types of intervention. And one of the things also is what that meta or systematic review and meta-analysis study is telling us is that based on the behaviors or the expression of unmet needs, you can find different kind of approach to that. So when a resident may be experiencing agitation, aggression, outdoor therapy like nature, connecting to nature, massage and touch therapy can be very efficient. When residents experience depression and anxiety, music therapy seems to be a very good non-pharmaceutical approach. And when residents experience apathy, restlessness, then light therapy is one that's very good. So before we continue, if we take a 2 minutes, Charles, and I know you're monitoring the chat, one quick question is, what expression of unmet needs are currently top of mind for your resident living with, or for you as you care for your resident living with dementia?
Thanks, Valerie. Great insights for the beginning of this webinar. So, audience, feel free to just drop in the chat to Valerie's prompt. When you think about the older adults, the residents you serve, what are the top 1, 2, 3 quote unquote unmet needs that you currently see? So Valerie, so far we have difficult interaction between residents, loneliness, sundowning, loneliness again, overstimulation. Wow, there's a lot. Wanting to go home, again, loneliness, agitation, apathy, depression, elopement, boredom.
Okay.
Sundowning.
So a good mix of different expression of unmet needs, but then also what I'm hearing, Charles, is different moments of the day. And this is something I'll touch a little bit on. The moment of the day and the type of intervention at the different moment of the day can also have an impact. Excellent. So what we wanted to provide today also is a framework to kind of evaluate the different intervention that you may be looking at doing, because there's a lot of technology on the market. There's a lot of product. People will come and say, oh, this is really good for this type of situation and things like this. What we suggest is that As you have different challenges or opportunities to improve the quality of life in one of the behaviors that you guys mentioned, we do suggest that you take a kind of three-pronged approach of first looking at the studies that has an effect on the type of intervention you want to have. So if it's loneliness, if it's agitation, you look at, okay, what has an impact on agitation? And that's where you're going to find things that are more high level, like music, touch, connecting with nature, those kind of things, so that you can be like, okay, I'm going to do a music intervention because this is the kind of expression of unmet needs I want to have an impact on. Then the second part is that there is studies about particular technology that you may be evaluating. So the first one is understanding what the science is telling us at a high level. And then a lot of the product on the market, especially in our field, will also have studies associated with the individual product. A lot of the time also what we found is a lot of those products comes out of a PhD or a university study. And then after that, they kind of decide to do something with it, or they adapt the product even more. And then prioritizing what will have the most impact in your senior living neighborhood and the resident that you want to have an impact with, which maybe other intervention are not working as well, and you want to try something new with those residents. So we'll start with outdoor, because as we prepared this webinar, it was quite interesting to see how much positive impact outdoor, and in this case, we kind of link gardening and hydroponic garden inside, like gardening outside. But this connection to outdoor was very clear that there's a lot of positive outcome that comes out of it as a non-pharmaceutical approach to care. And so Eugeria in particular, we didn't have an offer on this, and we're working on one because it's been a year that we're doing pilots around gardening like this to see the effect it has, but also to modify and adapt. And I'm so sorry, I have to cough. Sorry, I have two very young kids, and they bring back bugs from daycare, and I'm at the end of one. Sorry about that. So we could see in our pilot, and then also in what the research is telling us, that there is impact on agitation, self-esteem, and depression, and we'll go into the detail of this one here. So those here positive impact of gardening therapy came out of a meta-analysis or a systematic review of 14 studies showing that there was positive impact around agitation, stress levels, self-esteem, depression, emotional states, and engagement while doing gardening therapy. And that in some cases, it was more efficient than non-pharmaceutical or traditional pharmaceutical approach. And those benefits had to do also with using old skills and hobby. There's a lot of muscle memories also into gardening. If you have looked at the documentary on Netflix about the blue zone, we call it the green zone and the blue zone, but like gardening and plants have a lot of impact around longevity. So it does use old skill and hobby. It has a reminiscence aspect, a sense of accomplishment, sensory stimulation, physical activities, and social activities. Something surprising also is that meta-analysis study showed that there's impact on falls, like falling, and impact on sleep. So we thought this one was quite surprising, maybe not something we think about, but in the particularly of falls prevention, what the study could show is that there was a reduction in fall, but the reduction also in severity of those falls. So, and we will share those studies after. There's three hypotheses also around why gardening like this has such a positive effect. So first, you use the 5 senses, and later on, I'm going to talk about light therapy and games design also, and how we design game. And using 5 senses when we do an activity or when you plan for an intervention is quite important, because as we know, like older adults may have different they may have different needs in terms of how well they can hear, how well they can see, the touch, the smell. Like, so the more we try to use the 5 senses, the better chance we have to have an impact in people's life, and to improve their quality of life because of those variation in terms of how much they can see, how much they can hear, and things like this. The second hypothesis that they have around why it has such a positive effect was a sense of accomplishment. And this one here is a picture from one of our pilot sites where we did the pilot around the hydroponic garden. And that gentleman is holding the pH thermometers. So first thing, we had to adapt this because the pH thermometers we had in those pilots were written way too small. And I want to pause here and just say, sometimes the adaptation are not big, but if they're not done, people cannot have access to the intervention we're trying to do. So here, if people couldn't read what the pH level was, well, what's the point, in doing it? So it was a small adaptation, but we changed the size of the numbers on the pH level. And in that case here, it was a resident that's part of the independent living community, and they had to calculate how much to put of to reach the right pH level. They had to do a mathematical equation, and then they didn't calculate it on the right volume, so they had to redo it again. But that sense of accomplishment, that aspect of doing something, and you'll see on the right-hand side, acquiring new information, acquiring new skill, new challenges, making decisions, all of that has very positive effect on emotional state like we said before, and engagement. And there's something very interesting into connecting like this to the outdoor. So that was the first one that was more around outdoor garden connecting to nature. The second and third one we want to talk about is music and touch. And this one was quite interesting because it does have an impact on cognition, and we'll look at this for music in particular. It has an impact on cognition. It has an impact on depression and agitation. And I do want to stop here before I go into the studies that we looked at for this particular part of the webinar, and to say that there's specific example and stories that I can tell here around the touch aspect of it. So on that slide, you have two things that you can see. You have the hug, which you can see at the bottom right-hand corner. It's a sensory pillow that people can hug, and it has a heartbeat inside. And you can feel the heartbeat. So to go back to the 5 senses from before, the hug has a sensory component. You can also hear the heartbeat. You can send music onto the heartbeat, so you can hear things. And in that case, we had a particular lady that used to sleep with her husband every night for 60 years. And when she arrived in the context of memory care, she used to climb in other people's bed at night because of a very, that's it, an expression of unmet need, just a need to be next to someone after you spend 60 years sleeping next to someone. And they did provide the hug with the heartbeat inside to create this sense of companionship and security, in a sense, to help her sleep at night. And I thought that was particularly touching because of that aspect, sorry, play on word, but aspect of touch. And the second one is the cradle, which you see at the bottom left corner. The cradle is a music instrument that transforms touch into music notes. And on this one, we had a resident that was blind, and the connection he could feel because the music was matching the touch had a very, very positive effect in bringing him outside of that kind of social isolation he has from being blind, from not necessarily knowing what's happening in the different activity. And I go back again to the 5 senses. The more senses you can have in an activity or in an intervention, not being overstimulated, so not like blasting music and a lot of lights, like all within a normal kind of calming aspect, like that what works for dementia care. But the more of those 5 senses you can have of touching, listening, seeing, it's very important to have more success with those non-pharmaceutical approach. So if we go to music therapy, for this part here, what we've done is we looked at studies that were looking at 24 randomized controlled trial, so 24 studies to do a systematic review. And what was very clear is that cognition is something that improves significantly with music. And in that studies, when they look at all of those other studies, if I can say, they came down to a conclusion that it should be around an hour a week. So to be precise, they were saying during 12 weeks, 8 hours total, 16 sessions. So they kind of breaking it down to a session of 30 minutes over 12 weeks, have 16 sessions. And that kind of became their kind of conclusion when they look at those 24 randomized controlled trials around the impact it can have on cognition. It has impact also on depression and anxiety, and because of that, it does improve quality of life. And as we go into more of the details of that, of the music therapy, we can see here the trajectory of agitation by treatment group across time. So people in the music group started a bit more agitated and went down versus the people in the control group were like varying in terms of agitation level. And then same thing with the trajectory of aberrant behaviors across the different kind of group, music group and control group. So this is another studies that we did find that we will send after, but that kind of was showing really the impact those interventions can have of music therapy in the context of memory care. One thing to note when we were reading the study is that we need to be careful about the music that is playing. And I'll use a personal example on this one. I'll go back here. So I noticed that whenever I visited my grandma in memory care, the staff had put her radio channel that we had put on classical music and music that she will recognize. They put it back on like the hit list 100 of today's. And, you know, entering my grandma's room and it's Lady Gaga playing and it's different kind of music that she cannot really relate to. The study, this particular study was noting that if the music doesn't resonate with the person living with dementia, if it could create agitation also. So I thought it was interesting because that's the one thing about non-pharmaceutical approach is there needs to be thinking into the design of it and how we design those interventions, because we don't want to create more agitation because we're creating some anxiety related to a song they don't understand, they don't recognize, that the beat may be aggressive a little bit and things like this. And that's something I have noticed. So like in music, there is music that you're gonna see your resident like react to. What I've seen done also is looking at facial expression when you try different music and looking at shoulder. If their shoulder are going down, the facial expression is sad, maybe that's a music that doesn't bring happy memory, but you may see another song where that person every time start clapping their hand. In that case, intervention with music will have an impact on different behaviors. But I do wanted to pause because they did mention music that people cannot relate could have also a negative impact. And it made me think about my grandma kind of in her room listening to Lady Gaga that didn't really talk to any part of her brain that was still active in her dementia. Charles, I may continue. I didn't have a stop there, but is there anything in the chat or anything before I jump to the last section around game and lights?
I just added that I love Lady Gaga, so that's the last line in the chat. But before that, there was so many comments about music themselves.
Yeah.
Somebody was referenced music therapy research and some kudos to the Toval Tafel product, essentially. So no questions.
Thank you. Well, that's very nice. Yeah, music, it's so powerful. Like, I mean, we all saw that video of the lady that used to be a ballerina and the music started playing and she started dancing. If you have resident also that has Parkinson's disease, there is some research around dancing in Parkinson, like tango in particular. There's been a lot of research that has been done, and I'm on the board of a foundation and they want to do something with the ballet for people living with dementia, because there's kind of a new area around dance and maybe dance therapy where, because in dancing you have muscle memories that come a certain way. Maybe I can, another parenthesis, as I talk, I'm thinking about other things that I have either read or saw in the past, but there was something also around when you put music of when that person was younger, because of that muscle memories, it's possible that they can do tasks like washing the dishes or things like this more easily because the music bring them back in a moment in their life where they had that capacity or that muscle memory to do the task. So I think music is so powerful. And then if you add dance into that, there is great studies, but even more that can be done around having the right, the most efficient intervention ever so that we can really improve quality of life to a maximum.
You know, Valerie, years ago, somebody gave me one of the best pieces of advice, which is if you know nothing about the resident, right, and you only know the date of birth, then what you can do is Google songs that were popular when the person was around 20 years old-ish, 20,
Yes,
21. And that's a great place to
absolutely.
start. It's not going to give you probably not the first hit like the person loves, but at least an area where to start. So I thought that was some good advice.
Absolutely, you're so right. I heard the same thing, that
Mhm.
the year you remember the most is your early 20s.
Yeah.
And that's why also like nursery or adult therapy in memory care is very good right now, because that's a generation that had their kids in their 20s. We always look also like so I'm a hockey fan. I didn't say my accent is French Canadian. We're a very big hockey family. My husband is from St. Louis in Missouri, so he's a Blues fan. And when I look older adult in Montreal, in their 20s, the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup often. And sometimes I feel this is missing in the context of memory care. It's like an area where you can feel you're watching the games, and we can even play those older games because it was so common. It was what they were doing every 2 nights for many years with their team winning. But exactly, like we'll talk about reminiscence actually in this section of games, but
Sure.
reminiscence is also very, very powerful. So in this last section of the webinar, what we want to focus on is how do we design games? And on this one here, we'll build onto a research, and someone has mentioned the Tovertafel in the chat. So a lot of the images you see here is the Tovertafel, which is an interactive projector that was designed for people living with dementia. But what we want to focus on in this section is how they design the game. Like, because there's a paper that was published before the Tovertafel entered the market that was done by the founder of Tovertafel when she did her PhD. And the way you design game, and now we're going to go more around apathy in particular and positive emotion. Those are the two kind of aspects we want to influence the most with games and lights. The way you design games matter a lot. And I hope I give you tools in this section around designing a game. Even if you decide to do it yourself, like you want to design an activity, there's things that people with dementia won't respond to, and there's things that will have a positive impact, and that's what we're going to look at. So before I jump into how you design a game and which play experiences still work, there's two pieces of research that's interesting. The first one is around the environment, and the environment does matter. So there's positive result in music and functional modification to the environment, so it's more a home-like approach. There's positive effect on multisensory stimulation, but often there's limited access to those environments. So if you think about a multisensory room that is on the 3rd floor downstairs, the odds of bringing a resident there on weekend, night shift, sound downing, which was mentioned just before, so like to bring them there 10 minutes before meal is served, there's limited access, and that's a shame because they do work, and there is good research behind multisensory stimulation. One of the things also in this part of the research is wandering often is a result of understimulation. And I know a lot of people say overstimulation in the chat, and I'm sure there is overstimulation. I mean, I've been in a memory care neighborhood a few months ago where the chairs were making noise every time they were pulled out and in, and like really loud noise. And then there was music on the speaker, and the staff had walkie-talkies, and it's just like, yes, there is places where there's overstimulation. But what I thought was interesting is this research is also showing us that sometimes wandering is a result of understimulation. And if you enrich the environment with multi-sensory stimulation, you reduce the chance of boredom and undesirable behaviors. So the environment matters, and where you do those intervention matters. And the second thing also is the social aspect also matters, where sometime in the context of nursing homes, senior living communities, skilled nursing, people may be there but lack a common background. They may have lived very different lifestyle. They may have different social norms. And then on top of that, they have a disease called dementia, which is quite isolating. So in a lot of things, you guys said loneliness. It is true for people living with dementia, loneliness is definitely something, but also because in sometimes those where they live, they don't have a common background with people, and they have a disease that's quite isolating. And basically what they found there is that external stimulus is required to invite residents to interact socially between each other. And this one in particular, when you do play the Tovertafel, it's quite visible. You will have two residents, they kind of didn't see that there's someone next to them, but then they're passing the ball, and then all of a sudden they turn, they say, oh, hi, like you should catch this, you know? And those external stimulus is very important in the design of games so that people interact between each other while they have multiple barriers of lack of common background and the isolating disease. And that's quite important. And this is where I wanted, to stop just a little bit, and Charlie can help me with the chat, but I'm wondering, do you feel right now your current common room design support the possibility of implementing approach like music therapy, gardening, and now we're more around games and lights at any time? And that includes weekend, evenings, sundowning, and the different moments of the day that are quite important also when you may not be there and the rest of the staff is there. So I wonder how your current common room design looks like.
I think we have mostly no's. I've counted only 3 yeses so far. Some of them, actually, it's pretty encouraging. Some of them are saying that they're in the process of setting up these environments. And then people are also resonating with what you said regarding noises, especially coming from the nurse station.
Yeah.
And yeah. Actually, sorry,
Excellent. Well,
a
thank you.
couple comments also on where you mentioned including the weekends also. Yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent. And I'll accelerate just a little bit so we can keep 10 minutes at the end for questions. So now we're going to go into game design. So if you have to create a game, what matters and what did that research tell us? So the goal when you design a game is that you want to be designing for brain areas in dementia that are relatively intact. So what the research play experience for people living with Alzheimer's disease has done, and it was a research published in the International Journal of Design, is that there's different brain areas that are still relatively intact in the dementia journey, and there's other brain areas that are not. And if you design games with characteristic of the games that talks to a part of the brain that is not there anymore or not as intact, you won't have the same effect. So you need to design for brain areas that are relatively impact or slightly affected, but that may be able to respond with external stimulus. So those are the play experience or some example of the play experience. So when you do design a game or an activity or an intervention, you can play on someone sensation, reminiscence, captivation, challenges, competition. So let's think about a video game that someone may be designing. They may have some curiosity, humor, thrill, fantasy. I think, yeah, erotism is even there also on the page of the different play experience. And what that research team did, and that's the founder of the Tovertafel before she did the Tovertafel, is they looked at which part of the brain are still intact, and therefore which play experience could have the more impact. So what they found out is that there's 3 play experience that are suitable for all stages of dementia. Sensory stimulation, and we're going to go back to the 5 senses. Sensory stimulation is defined as the input and sensation you receive when one or more of your senses are activated. Relaxation, so this experience of unwinding, relaxation, stress relief, calmness during play is suitable for all stages. And then reminiscence, of recollecting past experiences and events. So those 3, if you use them as you design intervention or games or activities, those 3 plays are still suitable for all stages. There's plays that are suitable for the early to mid stages. So sympathy, experience of sharing emotional feelings, nurturing, caretaking, things like this, humor, so jokes, fellowship, expression, erotism. So erotism is still there. It's not something that we don't have a product for that or anything, but it is there because it's something that people do still experience in the earlier to mid stages because it talks to part of their brains that are still there. Subversion and challenges are all play that are suitable for the early to mid stage. There's one play that is not suitable at any stages in the disease, and it's the exploration. It's that play experience of going, like there is active wandering when people are trying to go back home or to go somewhere, but the play of exploration, of really sitting down and starting something and trying to explore and trying to figure out how, I don't know, like the example I have in mind is like how the IKEA furniture can be built. Like exploration is not something that's suitable at the different stages of dementia. And if you want, there's a summary of the result that we can share after, where you have those 3 experiences in the red: relaxation, reminiscence, sensation. There's a lot of play experience in the mild to moderate. There's some play experience in the earlier stages. And then there's not for Alzheimer's disease, it's exploration on the far right. And there are a few play experiences that there was no studies kind of found that could help us know where those play experiences kind of fit. But this one is a very interesting, it's like 10, 15 pages. If you yourself are trying to design a game, it's very interesting to go read. So the Tover-Tafel effect, so it's interesting. So let me go now very quickly around. There's research telling us that a non-pharmaceutical approach to dementia works. And it's true for outdoor music, touch, and games and lights. But then after, there's individual research done on a product. And for Tover-Tafel, that academic research is quite good because they have more than 5 either master degrees or PhD that were done. So they were able to prove that for their device, they're able to break through apathy, increase physical activities, reduce negative emotion, reduce agitation, and increase social activities and contributes to more enjoyment. And for the care staff, they were able to prove that it improves the relationship between care workers, well-being at work, and connection. And it's interesting because in their design, they have those external stimulus to help people connect between each other. And that's how we break through apathy, and that's how we improve the positive emotion. And it can be a very powerful tool. And to the point before around having the overall research is important, and then having the specific research also is important. And those here are just example of how the games are designed also to allow different people to be able to play. And on the far right side, you have the fish game, which is a new functionality they're working on where it's going to be more easily visible for people that are visually impaired, to be very more inclusive in how we design those games and have as many people as possible that can participate. So I'm almost at the end of our presentation. I think a lot of what we just did was looking at the effect you're trying to have to help you identify what type of intervention. And then there's studies done about a particular technology that can help you decide if that's the impact you want to have. And then you can prioritize based on that. And what we've done on this page here is we did put IN2L, Charles and LifeLoop have acquired IN2L in the past, But I remember going to those leading age conference and seeing Jack York on the stage with the lead researcher. So there's product out there that have continued to do research around their own product to make sure that it is efficient and it does answer an unmet needs. And in this page, what you have is the individual research. So we did talk about the kind of overall research around if a particular intervention works, and then you have individual research around for that particular product. So TOVR is more around light therapy and apathy and loneliness and boredomness. HUG is more around touch and a compassionate approach to well-being in dementia. That's how they titled their study called Sometimes a Hug is All You Need. And then Cradle, which is that music instrument, is all about reconnecting people and allowing people that may be nonverbal, blind, that may be very isolated in their disease to break out of their isolation through music and touch that is combined together. So I was finishing with this question, and Charles, I know you'll wrap up the session after, but do you feel also like maybe the last question I had before we conclude is, I'm sure we are aware that non-pharmaceutical approach does work, and just doing the research and the science and going deeper into it, it's even more powerful in knowing how important that work is. But I'm curious to know if everyone is aware enough of this. Is there people on the team that you feel that should be aware of them so that the way we improve quality of life has more of a coordinated approach between different departments? And Charles, I may let you kind of see what's on the chat for that kind of last question, and then I'll put it here also to kind of conclude.
I mean, there's one yes so far, but mostly no or not enough. And then, yeah, I guess, yeah, no, a lot of people are saying there's using somebody's expression like there's a lot of room for education. So hopefully this webinar is going to help. And one note to the audience is that we're going to be sharing the links on the website on lifeloop.com. So if you think there's anyone that would benefit from today's presentation, feel free to share the link to them. I'm curious about, as a follow-up question for you, when you give this presentation, what's, often sometimes it's more like the nursing department or a executive director that where there's room. What do you feel speaks the most to them?
But knowing that the work you guys do matters so much, like knowing that we can have even more impact than what is traditional medicine in the quality of life and how sustainable it can be and how human it is also as an approach. I think that part is powerful to have the data to show that whatever you're observing or realizing or seeing in your resident or knowing that those intervention has an impact, to see how strong the data is behind it. I think the work that you guys do is the most important work, is the most human work. That's it. Like, we need to ask ourselves, what is the way we can answer those needs? And a pill or traditional medication is not a very human answer.
I appreciate that so much, Val. As a invitation, please, everyone, feel free to, or at least consider contacting Eugeria or Val for more education or just to find out more about her company's awesome work. I also posted, and I'll do it again, Val's LinkedIn profile, which is a great way to also to continue the conversation. But before we close on, just a few questions, because some have come up in the chat, and obviously I personally have some as well. I know in Canada, there is, Canadian are slightly more innovative when it comes to this idea of social prescription. And we unfortunately don't have enough of that in the US. What are your thoughts on that? Any high level? Yeah.
I think it's interesting because some of our products that we have are from the UK or from the Netherlands, from the US, from Canada. And I feel every geography is thinking they're not doing enough and that the other geography is doing better. Okay. So like I would say like, sorry, I heard that in the UK, it's more normal to kind of prescribe the hug or to prescribe things that are non-pharmaceutical. In Australia, for example, different products are reimbursed when they have to do with cognition and if they are cognitive aid. We don't have that in Canada. But then in Canada, we have, that's it, more maybe some approach that are different. But then on the other side, in Canada, because it's private public, people have to transition often. So my grandma had to go from her home to independent living and assisted living. And then when she reached memory care, this was the public system. So she had to move like 3 times versus for you guys, you have a lot of campuses that can have someone from assisted living to memory care, which this like reduce the disruption. So I feel like the 4 geography I know more right now is the United States, Canada, UK, Netherlands, and Australia. And I feel each of them have something that's working and looking at the other and thinking that they can do better. So I think we can all do better.
Another question that came up actually several times. What are your overall thoughts on the use of aromatherapy and oils for these kind of situations?
Yeah, so I read it in one of the study. Aromatherapy was there when it was message and touch, but I'm not as familiar. This is area where also like for Eugeria, we don't necessarily want to have 10 options of the same needs. We want to go and answer each of the needs. So that's why we're looking right now at outdoor and connecting with nature. So I'm sure we'll deep dive into that. I've seen it in the research, but I'm not as familiar.
Okay. And then do you mind explaining more about the TurboTaff? I think, at least 3 times somebody asking, what is it?
Yes, so the Tovitafol is an interactive projector that is in the ceiling. It projects lights that reads the hand movement, and it reads the smallest hand movement. So if someone just do this, it gets captured by the sensor, and there's an action that happens. So that's how we break through apathy. And there's different games for different moments of the day. So some games will be at sundowning, has a very calming effect. Some game will be in the morning just before your resident eats, and you want them to be active and you want them to be hungry and for the nutrition to go better. So it has different games for different moments of the day. And this is a projector also where we do in-person demos, so you can see it with your resident. Because maybe one thing I will say is having experienced it with my grandma, and that's the role of Eugeria, is that the internet is full of good-looking video, and now with AI, you can have even like better video, but who knows how your resident will react. And you know, so like seeing it by yourself is something that's very important to us, so you can experience it before deciding.
Cool. I've always loved your work, Val, and bring all these awesome product under one roof and providing education and support is so needed. The other thing that I really like in your work is essentially you're obviously reducing the use of antipsychotics and chemical restraints, but I feel that a lot of your products just promote freedom, right, for our residents, like independence and so on. That's just awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in the Netherlands, when I first visited them, they said it's about adding life to the day, not days to the life.
Yeah,
And
I
it really
love that.
stuck with me. It's like adding lives to the day. This is what we strive for. Like this is this it's a privilege to age, but then let's make it meaningful for everyone. So
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely speak, I'm sure, everyone's language here. One last question, super short, Val, which is more like, I don't know if it's personal, but a question I really want to ask you and the audience to hear. What does it feel like to be a female entrepreneur in senior living?
So it's an interesting question. And I don't know if some people in the audience, their kids listen to Bluey, but I'll use a Bluey example. So in Bluey, one of the sisters may have celiac disease because in one episode, for one sentence, the dad says, gluten-free, gluten not free. My daughter has celiac disease. And just hearing that one sentence, she said, oh my God, Bingo is like me. She has celiac disease. Everything else in the show is not about celiac disease. Like it's even like a kind of theory on the internet. But when I saw her reaction to that one sentence and how she felt, oh wow, I I see myself in bingo. Like representation matters so much.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the thing. I never wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm a female entrepreneur. Okay, today I'm going to go about my day. I'm a female entrepreneur. No, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm trying to do my best. But whenever I see women in the CEO position, it's that little moment where, you know, representation does matter. Oh, I see
100%.
someone that looks like me that is in this position, so let's continue. And it doesn't influence my whole day, but those, and what I love about senior living is we do have a lot of amazing women in the position of power, being CEO, being executive director, and it's good. It's important. Representation does matter. I don't think about it often, but when I do, it's nice to see that people that looks like you are in those positions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring on so many levels, Val. The inspiration behind Eugeria, all of your awesome successes, seeing all of your product left and right. I mean, even as I shared in the preparation, I was talking to somebody this morning who, again, is such a fan of some of your products. Love also how you're building your company and just what you just said, being yourself, Val. So thank you so much. Any last
Thank you
word
very much.
Yeah, any last word before we wrap up? We're at time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I know you wanted also to say there's another webinar in February. But thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Val. Yeah, everyone, thank you all. Thank you for the participation in the chat. Awesome to see you all. The next one we're going to have is going to be our quote unquote state of resident engagement in 25. So our annual state of resident engagement. I'll be the one doing most of the talking, but I'm going to be very honored to be joined by Dr. Ashley Smalley, who's the National Director of Life Enrichment and Memory Care with Grace Management. Val, Eugeria, again, thank you so much for your awesome work. Everyone have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.